Today you're going to meet me.
After 3 years attending the gala alone, I was forced to hire a companion. What I didn't expect was that he would be the most feared Mafia boss in the entire city.
Welcome to my library. I'm Lena, and our story is just beginning.
Chapter 1. The Arrangement.
Tonight will be flawless.
The champagne in the hotel suite I'm staying in costs about the same as what people pay for their rent, and I was letting it go flat while I stared at my phone, at the confirmation message from the Escort agency, at the reality of what I was about to do. Your companion will arrive at 19:00. Discretion guaranteed. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy. As if paying someone to pretend to care about me for 6 hours was enjoyable, instead of just another item on the list of things I'd optimized in my perfectly curated, desperately empty life. The dress I'd chosen was black, because black was safe, severe enough to command respect but cut low enough at the back to suggest I was a woman who understood her own appeal. The hotel suite had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the kind of view that cost a fortune, and felt completely wasted on someone who'd spent the past 3 years working 80-hour weeks and calling it success. I looked good. I always looked good. That had never been the problem. The problem was that looking good and being good were entirely different things, and somewhere in the past decade of building my career at Sterling & Associates, I'd forgotten how to be anything other than competent. My phone buzzed. Tessa, my assistant, who knew everything about my professional life and too much about my personal one. Tessa, you're overthinking this. He's going to show up, be charming and handsome, help you survive the gala and leave. That's literally what you paid for. Me. What if he's weird? Tessa, then you have 6 hours of weird and a great story for therapy. Breathe. You're Sloan Hart. You've closed deals with men who terrified entire boardrooms. You can handle one escort. She was right. This was transactional. Simple, exactly the kind of problem I excelled at solving, except I'd never felt this hollow about success before. The knock came at exactly 7, punctual in a way I appreciated even through my nerves, and I checked myself one more time in the mirror before opening the door, and immediately forgot how to breathe. The man standing there wasn't an escort. He couldn't be. Men who looked like him didn't need to work for agencies. They had women offering themselves for free, probably in alphabetical order by desperation level. He was tall, easily 6'3", with dark hair styled in that deliberately careless way that suggested both money and an excellent barber. His suit was charcoal with subtle texture, the kind of tailoring that whispered custom rather than shouted it, and when his eyes met mine I felt the impact like a physical thing. Dark gray, almost silver in the hotel lighting, assessing me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. Sloan Hart, his voice matched the rest of him, smooth, controlled, with an accent that suggested British boarding schools and too much inherited wealth. Yes, I managed, stepping back. You're from Elite Companions. Killian, he said, offering his hand. And yes, may I? I nodded, and he entered with the kind of spatial awareness that suggested military training or something equally disciplined, his gaze sweeping the suite in seconds before returning to me. You're taller than your profile suggested, he observed. I'm wearing heels, I replied automatically, then felt stupid because that was exactly the kind of awkward thing I'd hired him to help me avoid. They work, Killian said, and something in his tone made it clear he wasn't just being polite. The dress, too. You look like someone who knows exactly what she wants. I look like someone who paid a stylist to tell me what to wear, I corrected, moving to the bar cart because standing still felt impossible. Water? Wine? There's champagne, but it's probably flat. Water, Killian said, surprising me. I don't drink on assignments. Assignments, I repeated, handing him the glass. That's what this is, isn't it? He challenged, accepting the water, but not drinking. You hired me for an evening. That makes it work. Work requires professionalism. Right, I said, relieved he understood even as part of me felt vaguely disappointed. So, the gala is at 8. Whitmore Foundation. Black tie, mostly corporate people from my firm and their partners. The objective is simple. Look like I have a life outside work. Don't give anyone ammunition for gossip. Survive 6 hours. Survival seems like a low bar, Killian observed. You haven't met my colleagues, I replied. Margaret from accounting asked me last week if I was seeing anyone, with the kind of concern usually reserved for terminal diagnoses. Apparently being 31 and single is cause for intervention. Is it? Killian asked. Cause for concern? It's cause for people to make assumptions about why I'm alone, I said, which is why you're here, to prove I'm capable of normal human interaction. Are you? He asked, and the question was so direct it caught me off guard. I'm capable of professional interaction, I corrected. Relationships require things I'm not good at, like vulnerability and emotional availability, and pretending someone else's problems are as important as my own. Honest, Killian said, and I couldn't tell if he was approving or judging. Efficient, I replied. Why waste time pretending? We both know what this is. You're being paid to play a role. I'm paying to avoid awkward questions. That's the arrangement. Most clients don't frame it quite so clinically, Killian observed, moving to the windows. Usually there's at least a pretense of romance. Romance is inefficient, I said, joining him while maintaining careful distance. It creates expectations and complications. I prefer clarity. Clearly, he said, and was that amusement? Tell me. Sloane, when was the last time you did something without calculating the outcome? The question struck deeper than I wanted to admit. That's not relevant to tonight. No? Killian turned to look at me, and his attention felt almost invasive, because I'm curious what drives someone as controlled as you to hire a stranger for an evening. That suggests risk tolerance that contradicts everything else about your presentation. It suggests pragmatism, I said. The risk of showing up alone again was worse than the risk of hiring help. Help, he repeated. That's what you think I am. That's what you are, I said, confused. You work for an escort agency. I hired you. That's the transaction. Killian was quiet for a moment, something calculating happening behind those silver eyes. What did the profile say? That made you choose me specifically. Good reviews, professional experience with corporate events, discreet, I listed. You matched the requirements? That's all. Not the photo, he pressed. The photo was vague, but attractive enough to be convincing, I admitted. Why does it matter? It doesn't, Killian said, but his tone suggested otherwise. I'm just trying to understand you. There's nothing to understand, I said. Wait, I'm hiring you for 6 hours. You don't need my psychology. You need to know how to make appropriate small talk and look interested when people tell boring stories about their kids. And if someone asks how we met, Killian asked. Through mutual friends, I said. Keep it vague. People don't actually want details. They want confirmation I'm normal enough to maintain a relationship. And are you? He asked, echoing his earlier question. Normal enough? I'm here. Aren't I challenged. Hiring an escort to maintain appearances. That's either very normal or completely insane depending on your perspective. I think it's survival, Killian said quietly, and I think you're lonelier than you want to admit. The observation landed like a punch, and I felt my carefully maintained composure crack. That's not your concern, I said, my voice sharper than intended. Your concern is showing up, looking good, helping me survive the gala. That's what I'm paying for, not analysis. Fair enough, Killian replied, but his eyes said he'd already cataloged that weakness, filed it away for later use. And that was when I realized my mistake. This man wasn't just attractive, he was dangerous. He read people the way I read spreadsheets, efficiently, accurately, looking for vulnerabilities to exploit. I'd hired him for control, but standing here with his attention focused on me like I was the most interesting thing in the room, I felt control slipping away entirely. We should establish boundaries, I said, moving back to safer ground. No unnecessary physical contact beyond what's needed for appearances. No personal questions that don't serve the story. No attempts to extend this beyond tonight. Anything else? Killian asked. Yes, I said. And if this gets uncomfortable, if you do or say something that crosses a line, I need you to stop. Immediately. No questions. Something shifted in his expression, became almost gentle. I'm not here to make you uncomfortable, Sloane. I'm here to make your evening easier. That's all. Good, I said, checking my watch. We should leave in 15 minutes. Before we go, Killian said, stopping me. One thing you should know about me. What? I asked. That I'm very good at what I do, he said, and the certainty in his voice was absolute. By the end of tonight, everyone at that gala will believe we're exactly what you want them to believe. You hired the right person. Confident, I observed. Accurate, he corrected, and smiled in a way that made my stomach flip. Now, shall we discuss our story? How long we've been seeing each other? What we have in common? What made you decide I was worth bringing to this event? We spent the next 10 minutes building a believable narrative. 3 months, met through a colleague's dinner party, bonded over shared appreciation for obscure documentaries and the kind of wine that required explanation. Killian absorbed every detail with frightening efficiency, asked clarifying questions, even suggested adjustments that made the story more believable. By the time we left the suite, I almost believed it myself. The problem was, so did he. And watching him play the role of attentive boyfriend with disturbing authenticity as we rode the elevator down to the lobby, I realized I'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. I'd thought hiring an escort would give me control. But Killian moved through the world like he owned it, commanded attention without trying, made me feel seen in ways I'd spent years avoiding. And that was far more dangerous than showing up to the gala alone could ever be. Chapter 2. The Performance.
The dance isn't as good as I imagined.
The Whitmore Foundation Gala was exactly as insufferable as I'd anticipated. Crystal chandeliers, string quartet playing something classical and forgettable, and approximately 200 people in expensive clothes pretending their charitable donations absolved them of whatever sins funded their lifestyles. Smile, Killian murmured as we entered, his hand settling on my lower back with practiced ease. You look like you're attending a funeral. I am attending a funeral, I replied under my breath. For 6 hours of my life, I'll never get back. There's the enthusiasm I was hoping for, he said, and I heard amusement beneath the words. Should I start taking bets on how long before you fake a medical emergency? I don't fake emergencies, I said. I endure them with dignity. That sounds exhausting, Killian observed, guiding me through the crowd with the kind of spatial awareness that suggested he'd mapped the entire room already. Have you considered just enjoying things occasionally? Enjoying things is inefficient, I replied automatically, then caught his expression. What? You say that a lot, he observed. Inefficient. Like life is supposed to be optimized instead of lived, isn't it? I challenged. Not even remotely, Killian said, and something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. Before I could respond, Margaret from accounting materialized with the inevitability of taxes, her eyes bright with curiosity. Sloane, you made it. She air-kissed both my cheeks with aggressive enthusiasm. And you brought someone. How wonderful. Margaret, this is Killian, I said, shifting into professional mode. Killian, Margaret handles our client accounts. Pleasure, Killian said, and his smile was perfect. Warm, but not excessive. Interested, but not invasive. Sloane's mentioned you. You're the one who keeps the partners from making catastrophic financial errors. Margaret practically glowed. She said that. Constantly, Killian lied smoothly, and I watched Margaret melt. She says you're the only person in the office who actually understands how money works. I had said nothing of the sort, but watching Margaret preen under his attention, I realized Killian was doing exactly what I'd hired him for, making me look like a normal person who said nice things about colleagues instead of someone who viewed human interaction as a necessary evil. How did you two meet? Margaret asked, and I felt Killian's hand tighten slightly on my back. A dinner party, I said, using our rehearsed story. Mutual friend. We bonded over documentaries. How romantic, Margaret said, clearly disappointed by the mundane details. And how long have you been seeing each other? 3 months, Killian supplied, his timing perfect. Though it feels longer, Sloane has a way of making time feel flexible. The way he said it, with just enough warmth to sound genuine but not enough to be excessive, was so perfectly calibrated I almost believed him myself. Well, you're good for her, Margaret declared. She works too much. Someone needs to remind her there's life outside the office. I'm working on it, Killian said, and the look he gave me was so convincingly affectionate. I felt something uncomfortable twist in my chest. Margaret wandered off to gossip with someone else, and I turned to Killian. You're very good at this, I observed quietly. At what? He asked innocently. Lying, I said. You made Margaret believe we're actually together in approximately 90 seconds. I didn't lie, Killian corrected. I just emphasized certain truths and omitted others. There's a difference. That's called lying by omission, I pointed out. That's called survival in situations that require discretion, he replied, and something about the way he said it made me pause. You sound like you have a lot of practice with discretion, I observed. I work for an escort agency, Killian said smoothly. Discretion is literally the job description. It was a perfectly reasonable answer that didn't quite explain the military precision in how he moved, or the way his eyes constantly tracked the room like he was assessing threats, or the fact that his suit probably cost more than the agency would charge for an entire month of his time. Champagne? A server appeared with a tray, and I reached for a glass automatically. She'll have water, Killian said, intercepting my hand gently. She gets migraines from champagne. Don't you, darling? I stared at him. I do not get migraines from champagne. You do tonight, he replied, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Trust me. Something in his tone made me accept the water instead, and I watched him navigate the server away with efficient courtesy. Why did you do that? I asked when we were alone again. Hey, because you're already anxious, Killian said quietly. Alcohol makes anxiety worse, and you hired me to make this evening easier, not to watch you spiral in public. I hired you to look pretty and make small talk, I corrected, not to manage my sobriety. I'm capable of multitasking, he replied, and steered me toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. You're gripping that water glass like it's personally offended you. Relax. I am relaxed, I said through gritted teeth. You're performing relaxed, Killian corrected. There's a difference. Here. He positioned himself between me and the crowd, creating a small pocket of privacy. Breathe. No one's watching. No one cares. You're doing fine. You don't know that, I said. I do know that, he replied. I've been watching the room. 3 people have looked at us. Margaret, who's already telling everyone you're finally dating someone normal, and 2 associates from your firm who seem more interested in the canapes than your personal life. You've been tracking that? I asked, surprised. I told you, Killian said. I'm very good at what I do. He was Disturbingly good. Too good for someone who was supposedly just an escort making rent. Sloane Hart, another voice interrupted, and I turned to find James Whitmore, the Foundation's founder and one of Sterling's biggest clients, approaching with his wife. Wonderful to see you. And who's this? The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk, and I watched Killian navigate every interaction with disturbing competence. He knew when to speak and when to let me lead, when to touch me for appearances and when to maintain appropriate distance, when to laugh at jokes that weren't funny and when to ask questions that made people feel heard. He was performing perfectly, too perfectly. "You're staring," Killian said during a lull in conversation, his mouth close to my ear. "People will notice. You're acting like you've done this before," I said. "Been someone's fake boyfriend at corporate events." "I have done this before," Killian replied. "That's why you hired me." "No," I said, studying his face. "You're acting like you've been to events like this as a guest, not hired help. There's a difference." Something flickered in his expression before he controlled it. "You're very observant." "It's my job to read people," I said. "You're comfortable here, with these people. This level of wealth and pretension, that's not something you learn from escorting. That's something you're born into." "Careful, Sloane," Killian said, his voice dropping lower. "You're dangerously close to asking personal questions. I thought we had boundaries." "We do," I agreed, "but you're breaking character, and I want to know why. Maybe I'm just very good at my job," he suggested. Or maybe you're not actually an escort at all," I replied, and watched his jaw tighten slightly. "Does it matter?" Killian asked. "I'm doing what you hired me for, making you look good, helping you survive this evening. What else do you need to know?" "The truth," I said. "I need to know if I made a massive mistake hiring you." "You didn't," Killian said firmly. "But you're right about one thing. I'm not just an escort. I'm also someone who values privacy. And I'd appreciate if you'd extend me the same courtesy I'm extending you." "Which is?" I asked. "Not asking questions you're not ready to hear the answers to," he said, and something in his eyes was both warning and invitation. Before I could press further, the lights dimmed and someone announced dinner was being served, and Killian guided me toward our assigned table with his hand warm against my back. We were seated with 6 other people from Sterling, including Margaret and the senior partners, and I watched Killian charm every single one of them with strategic precision. He asked the right questions, laughed at the right moments, touched my hand occasionally with exactly enough casual affection to look genuine without being excessive, and I found myself getting distracted by stupid things, like the way his fingers moved when he gestured, the precise way he cut his food into geometrically perfect pieces, the fact that he knew which fork to use for each course without hesitation. "You're doing it again," he murmured halfway through the main course. "Doing what?" I asked. "Analyzing," he said. "I can practically hear you cataloging observations. I'm naturally curious," I said. "You're naturally suspicious," Killian corrected. "There's a difference." "Can you blame me?" I challenged. "And you're too good at this. Too comfortable. Too everything. Would you prefer I was awkward and uncomfortable?" he asked. "I'd prefer you were honest," I replied. "I am being honest," Killian said, his eyes meeting mine. "About the things that matter. Everything else is just details." "Details like your real name?" I pressed. "My name is Killian," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was lying or not. "Your real job," I continued. "Tonight, my real job is making sure you have a successful evening," Killian replied. "Which I'm doing, quite well, actually, if you'd stop interrogating me long enough to notice." He was right. I was doing exactly what I always did, overanalyzing, looking for problems, refusing to just accept something good when it was happening. "You're right," I admitted. "I'm sorry." "Professional hazard." "What kind of professional hazard?" Killian asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. "I'm a consultant," I said. "I get paid to find problems in systems and fix them. It makes me look for problems everywhere, even when there aren't any." "And you think I'm a problem?" he asked. "I think you're a mystery," I corrected. "And I don't like mysteries." "Maybe you should learn to like them," Killian suggested. "Not everything needs to be solved, Sloane. Some things are better left unknown." "That sounds like something someone with secrets would say," I observed. "Everyone has secrets," Killian replied, "including you. I'm just better at keeping mine." The dinner ended around 11, and people started drifting toward the exit or the hotel bar for after-party drinks. I was ready to leave, to end this strange evening and go back to my normal, controlled existence. But Killian caught my hand as I stood. "Dance with me first," he said. "That wasn't part of the arrangement," I protested. "Consider it a bonus," Killian replied, pulling me toward the dance floor where a few couples were swaying to something slow and romantic. "One dance. Then we can leave." I let him lead me because refusing felt petty, and because part of me, the part I usually ignored, wanted to see what it felt like to be close to him without the buffer of conversation or crowds. His hand settled on my waist, warm and certain, and I placed mine on his shoulder, trying not to think about how perfectly we fit together. "You survived," Killian said as we moved. "Congratulations." "Thanks to you," I admitted. "You were perfect. Almost too perfect." "There's no such thing as too perfect," Killian replied. "There is, when it makes me suspicious," I said, and felt him laugh softly. "Fair enough," he conceded. "But Sloane, can I tell you something?" "What?" I asked. "Tonight wasn't as difficult as I expected," he said, his voice dropping lower. "You're not what I thought you'd be." "What did you think I'd be?" I asked. "Cold, demanding. Using me as a prop without actually seeing me," Killian said. "But you're not cold. You're careful. And there's a difference." The observation landed uncomfortably close to truths I usually kept buried. "You don't know me well enough to make that assessment, don't I?" he challenged. "I've spent 4 hours watching you navigate a room full of people who make you uncomfortable. I've seen how you force yourself to smile when you'd rather leave, how you calculate every word before you speak it, how you're constantly performing instead of just being." "That's not," I started. "It's exhausting, isn't it?" Killian interrupted gently. "Always being in control, always having the right answer, never letting anyone see that you're just as uncertain as everyone else." I felt something crack in my chest, and I pulled back slightly. This wasn't part of the deal. "You're not supposed to actually see me." "Too late," Killian said, and his eyes held mine with uncomfortable intensity. "I see you, Sloane, and I think you hired me because you wanted someone to see you, even if only for one night." "That's not," I stopped, because he was right, and I hated that he was right. "It's okay," Killian said quietly. "You don't have to admit it, but I want you to know something." "What?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad you hired me," he said, "even if it's just for tonight, even if it's just pretend. I'm glad I got to see the real you, the one you hide behind all that control." And standing there on the dance floor with his hand warm on my waist, and his words dismantling every defense I'd carefully built, I realized I'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. I hadn't hired an escort for the evening. I'd hired someone who saw straight through me, and that was infinitely more dangerous than showing up alone could ever be.
He intercepted her champagne, charmed Margaret in 90 seconds, knew exactly which fork to use, far too suspicious, scolded her for pretending to be relaxed, and then said, "I see the real you, and you're not fooling anyone," right there on the dance floor. This man is trouble disguised in a suit, and I love IT. Why would that be? Oh, right. I wrote it myself.
Chapter 3. The Inconsistencies.
I think I need to go out.
The dance ended and I stepped back immediately, needing distance from whatever that conversation had been, and Killian let me go without resistance. "I should get back to the hotel," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The evening's over. You fulfilled the arrangement." "I did," Killian agreed, but he made no move to leave. "Though technically I'm paid until midnight. It's only 11:30. Consider the extra 30 minutes a tip," I said, already moving toward the exit. "Sloane," he called, and something in his tone made me stop. "At least let me walk you back. It's late." "The hotel is 3 blocks away, and I'm perfectly capable of walking alone," I replied. "I'm aware," Killian said, catching up to me, "but I'd feel better knowing you made it safely. Indulge me." It was phrased as a request, but felt like something else, and I found myself nodding despite my better judgment. We walked in silence for the first block, the city alive around us with Friday night energy, and I tried not to notice how Killian positioned himself on the street side, or how his hand occasionally hovered near my back without actually touching. "You're doing it again," I said finally. "Doing what?" he asked. "Acting like protection detail instead of an escort," I said. "You've checked our surroundings approximately 17 times in 2 blocks. Old habit," Killian replied easily. "I grew up in a rough neighborhood. You learn to stay aware." "Your suit costs at least $8,000, I observed. "People from rough neighborhoods don't wear $8,000 suits." "Maybe I'm very good at my job and saved up," he suggested. Or maybe you're lying about who you are," I countered. Killian stopped walking, turning to face me under a streetlight. "Does it matter? The evening's over. I did what you hired me for. What difference does it make who I actually am?" "It matters because I don't like being deceived," I said, "and you've been deceiving me all night." "Have I?" he challenged. "I showed up when I said I would. I helped you navigate a difficult social situation. I made you look good in front of your colleagues." "What part of that was deception?" "The part where you pretended to be someone you're not," I replied. "We were both pretending," Killian pointed out. "You pretended to be someone who has their life together. I pretended to be your boyfriend. That was the arrangement." The observation stung because it was accurate, and I resumed walking because standing still felt too vulnerable. "I do have my life together," I said. "Do you?" Killian asked, falling into step beside me. "Because from where I'm standing, You're desperately lonely, using work as a shield against actual human connection, and so afraid of losing control that you hired a stranger to avoid dealing with real intimacy. I stopped again, anger flaring. You don't know anything about me. I know you've checked your phone 43 times tonight, even though it's Friday and you're not on call, Killian said. I know you calculate your words before speaking, that you apologize when you don't need to, and that you touched your necklace every time someone asked about your personal life. Those are tells, Sloan, and I'm very good at reading them. I started, but couldn't finish because he was right about all of it. I'm not judging, Killian said, his tone gentling. I'm just observing that maybe you and I aren't that different, both performing, both hiding, both pretending we're fine when we're actually just surviving. You don't know what you're talking about, I said, but the words came out weak. Don't I? He challenged. Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're actually happy with your perfectly controlled, desperately empty life. My life isn't empty, I protested. I have a career, success, independence, and absolutely no one who actually knows you, Killian finished, which is why you hired me. Because at least with an escort, the loneliness is temporary and transactional. The accuracy of it was devastating, and I felt something crack in my chest that I'd been holding together through sheer stubbornness. This conversation is over, I said, starting to walk again. Thank you for your services. Consider yourself paid and dismissed. Sloan, Killian started, but I cut him off. I mean it. We're done. The evening's over. Go back to your agency and find your next client. I made it half a block before realizing he was still following me, and I turned to find him keeping pace with that same careful distance. I told you to leave, I said. And I told you I'm walking you back, Killian replied. You can be angry at me all you want, but I'm not letting you walk alone at midnight. That's non-negotiable. You don't get to decide what's negotiable, I said. I'm not your responsibility. For the next 15 minutes you are, Killian countered. After that, I'll disappear. But until then, you're stuck with me. We reached the hotel in tense silence, and I stopped at the lobby entrance. There, I'm safe. You can go now. I'm walking you to your room, Killian said. That's unnecessary, I protested. That's what I'm doing, he replied, and something in his tone made arguing feel pointless. The elevator ride up was excruciating, both of us standing on opposite sides pretending the other wasn't there, and when we reached my floor I walked to my suite without looking back. Sloan, Killian said, as I reached for my key card. What? I asked, not turning around. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I shouldn't have pushed. You hired me for a simple evening, not existential analysis of your life choices. No, you shouldn't have, I agreed, unlocking the door. But I'm not sorry for what I said, Killian continued, because it was true, and I think you needed to hear it. I turned finally, finding him standing there looking less controlled than he had all evening. Why do you care? This was just a job. I was just another client. You were never just another client, Killian said, and something in his voice made my heart skip. From the moment you opened that door, you were different. And he stopped, seeming to wrestle with something. You what? I pressed. I don't want this to be over, he admitted, which is extremely problematic and completely inappropriate. But there it is. I don't want to walk away. The confession hung between us, and I felt my carefully maintained defenses crumbling entirely. You have to, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. This was one night. That was the deal. Deals can be renegotiated, Killian suggested, moving slightly closer. What if I gave you my real number? What if we tried this without the agency, without the transaction, without the performance? That would be insane, I said. Probably, he agreed. But you hired me because you wanted to feel something other than empty. And I haven't felt this interested in someone in longer than I can remember. So maybe we're both a little insane. I should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, should have closed the door and let him disappear back into whatever life he actually led. But standing there looking at him, at the vulnerability breaking through his controlled exterior, I found myself saying something entirely different. One coffee, I heard myself say. Tomorrow, somewhere public. No arrangements, no money, just two people seeing if there's actually anything real here. Killian's expression shifted into something that looked almost like relief. Tomorrow, coffee, I can do that. This is a terrible idea, I said. The worst, he agreed. Give me your phone. I handed it over, watching him type in his number and send himself a text. There, he said, handing it back. Now you can reach me, and I can prove I'm not just disappearing. What if you're a serial killer? I asked. Then coffee in public was an excellent precaution, Killian replied, smiling. Though if I were a serial killer, I'd have much more efficient methods than coffee dates. That's not reassuring, I said. It wasn't meant to be, he replied. Good night, Sloan. Thank you for tonight. It was, he paused, searching for words, the most honest evening I've had in a very long time. He left before I could respond, and I stood there in my doorway watching him walk away, and wondering if I'd just made the best or worst decision of my life. My phone buzzed with a text from his number. Killian. For the record, I'm not a serial killer, just someone who thinks you're remarkable and wants to know you better. Sleep well. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Me, this is still insane. Killian, the best things usually are. And standing there in my hotel suite with the city lights outside and his words on my screen, I realized I'd completely lost control of the situation, which was terrifying, and somehow, unexpectedly, exactly what I needed. Chapter 4, The Coffee Date.
What am I doing?
I woke up Saturday morning with regret sitting heavy in my chest and Killian's number still on my phone screen, and I spent approximately 45 minutes convincing myself that texting him to cancel was the rational, sensible, intelligent thing to do. Then I spent another 15 minutes staring at my closet trying to figure out what one wore to coffee with a man who might be an escort, or might be a billionaire, or might be a complete fraud. I settled on jeans and a silk blouse because it suggested casual confidence I absolutely didn't feel, and arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early because being late felt like losing control. Killian was already there. He sat at a corner table wearing dark jeans and a navy sweater that probably cost more than my entire outfit, looking unfairly attractive while reading something on his phone with focused intensity. When he noticed me, his face did something complicated that looked almost like relief. "You came," he said, standing. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted, sitting across from him. And I spent most of the morning constructing elaborate excuses for canceling. "What stopped you?" Killian asked. "Curiosity," I said honestly, "and stubbornness. I don't like mysteries. And you're definitely a mystery." "Fair," he replied, signaling the server. "What do you drink?" "Americano. 2 shots. No sugar," I said automatically, then caught his expression. "What? You ordered that without hesitation," Killian observed. "Most people need to look at the menu first. Decide. Deliberate." "I know what I like," I said. "Deliberation is for people who don't, or for people who occasionally try new things," he suggested. "New things are variables," I replied. "Variables introduce uncertainty. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. You really do need to learn to let go," Killian said, and something in his tone made it sound less like criticism and more like invitation. The server brought our coffees, my Americano and something complicated and European-looking for him, and we sat in awkward silence for a moment, before both speaking simultaneously. "So, about last night," we stopped, and Killian gestured. "You first." "I just wanted to clarify expectations," I said, falling into professional mode because it felt safer. I'm not looking for a relationship. I don't do relationships. They're complicated and messy and require emotional availability I'm not capable of." "Okay," Killian said carefully. "Then what are you looking for?" "Honesty," I said. "I want to know who you actually are, not the persona from last night. Not the escort character, the real person." "And if the real person is disappointing?" he asked. "Then at least I'll know," I replied. "I can handle disappointing." "I can't handle deception." Killian was quiet for a moment, something working across his expression that looked almost like calculation. "All right, what do you want to know?" "Your real name," I said immediately. "Killian Gray," he replied without hesitation. That part was true. "Your real job," I continued. "That's more complicated," Killian said, wrapping his hands around his cup. "I run a company, multiple companies actually. Security consulting, risk assessment, strategic planning for high-level clients. That sounds like corporate speak for something else," I observed. "It is," he admitted, "but the something else isn't illegal, if that's what you're worried about. Just private. Clients who need discretion pay extremely well for it. And the escort thing," I pressed. "How does that fit?" Killian's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It doesn't. Not usually. Last night was an anomaly." "What kind of anomaly?" I asked suspiciously. "The kind where I owed someone a favor and they called it in at an inconvenient time," Killian said. "The agency is owned by a friend. She needed someone last minute for a high-profile client who required specific qualities. I fit the profile." "So you don't normally do this," I said. "I've never done it before," Killian corrected, "and I'm reasonably certain I won't do it again." Once was enough to confirm it's absolutely not my skill set. "You were perfect last night," I said before I could stop myself. "I was performing," Killian replied. "There's a difference, but thank you for the compliment." We fell into easier conversation after that, trading information in careful increments. He told me about growing up in London, moving to the States for university, building his company from nothing. I told him about my career at Sterling, the suffocating expectations, the way I'd optimized my entire life until there was nothing left but work. "You said you don't do relationships," Killian said eventually. "Why not?" "Because relationships require vulnerability," I said, stirring my coffee even though I'd finished it already. "And vulnerability vulnerability means giving someone power to hurt you. I prefer not to give anyone that power. That sounds lonely, he observed. Or it's safe, I corrected. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Killian said. You can be safe and lonely simultaneously. In fact, that seems to be your default setting. Stop analyzing me, I said, but without real heat. I can't help it, Killian replied. You're fascinating. This perfect exterior hiding absolute chaos underneath. The control issues masking fear. The way you plan everything except the parts that actually matter. How do you know what matters? I challenged. Because you hired an escort instead of just asking someone on a date, Killian said bluntly. That's not control, Sloane. That's avoidance. And I recognize it because I do the same thing. You avoid relationships? I asked. I avoid anything that requires actual emotional investment, Killian admitted. It's easier to stay detached, safer, less complicated when things inevitably fall apart. So we're both disasters, I said. We're both extremely functional disasters, he corrected, which is different. We've just optimized our lives around avoiding the messy human parts. And yet here we are, I said, having coffee, being messy. Here we are, Killian agreed, and something in his expression shifted. Sloane, can I be honest about something? Haven't you been? I asked. Not entirely, he admitted. Last night, when I showed up at your hotel, I was prepared to do a job, play a role, collect payment and disappear. But then you opened that door looking terrified and defiant simultaneously, and something shifted. What shifted? I asked, my pulse quickening. I wanted to know you, Killian said simply. The real you, not the performance. And that hasn't happened to me in a very long time. So when you said terrible idea to coffee, I should have agreed and walked away. But I didn't want to walk away. Why not? I pressed. Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me and seen something other than utility, Killian said. You saw through the performance, noticed the inconsistencies, refused to just accept the easy answer. And that kind of perception is rare. Or I'm just paranoid, I suggested. You're observant, he corrected, and I like it, even when it's inconvenient. This is insane, I said, echoing my words from last night. We don't know each other. This is one coffee after one fake date. Normal people don't. We're not normal people, Killian interrupted. You've established that, so maybe we stop trying to be normal and just see what happens when two disasters try being honest with each other. That sounds like a recipe for catastrophe, I said. Probably, he agreed. But you hired me because you wanted to feel something other than empty, and I'm offering you that. No transaction, no performance, just two people figuring out if there's something real here. I should have said no. Should have finished my coffee and left and gone back to my perfectly controlled, desperately empty life. But looking at him across the table, seeing vulnerability beneath the confidence, I found myself nodding. 1 week, I said. We try this for 1 week. Real conversations. Actual honesty, and if it's terrible, we walk away with no hard feelings. 1 week, Killian agreed, and held out his hand. I shook it, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine, and wondered if I'd just agreed to the best or worst decision of my life. This is going to be a disaster, I said. Absolutely, Killian agreed, smiling, but at least it'll be an honest disaster. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed to hear. Chapter 5, The Weekday 2.
I hope she comes.
Killian texted me at 9 a.m. with coordinates to a location I didn't recognize, and the message, "Trust me," which was exactly the kind of vague instruction designed to make my control issues flare, and I spent 20 minutes debating whether to respond before finally typing, "This better not be a kidnapping. Killian. Would I warn you if it was?" Me. Point taken. What should I wear? Killian. Something you don't mind getting wet. I stared at my phone trying to determine if that was innuendo or practical advice, and settled on athletic clothes because at least then I'd be prepared for either scenario. The coordinates led to a private dock on the river, and I found Killian waiting beside a sleek speedboat that probably cost more than my annual salary. "You own a boat," I observed, approaching cautiously. "I own several boats," Killian corrected, offering his hand to help me aboard. "This one's my favorite. Fast enough to be interesting, stable enough to be safe. That sounds like a metaphor," I said, accepting his help because refusing felt petty. "Everything's a metaphor if you think about it hard enough," he replied, and I watched him move around the boat with practiced efficiency, checking lines and gauges with the ease of someone who'd done this countless times. "And where are we going?" I asked, as he started the engine. "Away," Killian said simply. "You spent yesterday analyzing our coffee date. Today we're going somewhere you can't overthink. I don't overthink, I protested. You sent me 47 text messages last night, Killian said, steering us away from the dock, ranging from, "This is a terrible idea," to detailed analysis of our conversation to asking if I actually liked my coffee or was just being polite. That's overthinking. I was being thorough, I defended. You were spiraling, he corrected, but his tone was gentle. Which is why we're doing this. No phones, no analysis, just being present. I'm always present, I said. You're always calculating 3 steps ahead, Killian replied. There's a difference. Now sit down before you fall overboard. The next 2 hours were surprisingly perfect. Killian took us out far enough that the city disappeared, cut the engine, and we just drifted while he taught me things about boats I'd never wanted to know but found myself fascinated by anyway. You're very good at this, I observed, watching him adjust something on the sail with competent hands. I grew up on boats, Killian said. My grandfather had a yacht, spent every summer learning to sail properly. Yachts are different from speedboats, I pointed out. I'm a man of varied interests, he replied, and something about the way he said it made me suspicious again. Killian, I said carefully, how much money do you actually have? He looked at me for a long moment before answering. Enough that I don't think about it. Why? Because everything you own is expensive, I said. The suits, the boat, the way you move through the world like you've never had to worry about cost. That's not normal consultant money. I'm very successful, Killian said. You're evasive, I corrected, which makes me think you're hiding something. Everyone's hiding something, he replied, steering us back toward shore. The question is whether what I'm hiding matters to what's happening between us. Does it? I pressed. I don't know yet, Killian admitted, but I'm trying to be honest with you, Sloane. Within reason, I repeated. That's a qualifier that concerns me. It should, he said, because complete honesty is overrated. Sometimes discretion is kinder. Day 4. I met him for dinner at a restaurant I'd never heard of, but that clearly required reservations months in advance based on the clientele, and Killian greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that felt too natural for 4 days of knowing each other. You look beautiful, he said, and the way his eyes tracked over my dress suggested he meant it. You look expensive, I replied, gesturing to his tailored suit. Do you own anything that doesn't cost more than my rent? I own a very comfortable pair of sweatpants, Killian said, pulling out my chair. Though I don't think they'd be appropriate for this particular venue. Dinner was excellent, conversation easier than it should have been, and I found myself laughing at his dry observations about the other diners in ways that felt dangerously close to actual enjoyment. You're different tonight, Killian observed over dessert. Different how? I asked. Relaxed, he said, less calculated. You're not editing yourself as much. Is that good or bad? I asked carefully. It's honest, Killian replied, which is what we agreed to try, and I like it, seeing you without the armor. I'm not sure I have much underneath the armor, I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. You have more than you think, Killian said, and his hand found mine across the table. You're just used to hiding it. From everyone, including yourself. The touch sent electricity up my arm that had nothing to do with the wine and everything to do with the way he was looking at me. Killian, I said, pulling my hand back because the contact felt too intimate. What are we doing? Having dinner, he said innocently. You know what I mean, I replied. This week, these dates that aren't dates. The way you look at me like you're constantly figuring something out. What's the end game? Does there have to be one? Killian asked. Can't we just see what happens? I don't do see what happens, I said. I do plans and outcomes and measurable objectives. Then measure this, Killian suggested, leaning forward. How do you feel right now? In this moment, not what you think you should feel, or what makes logical sense, just what you actually feel. I took a breath, forced myself to be honest, terrified, exhilarated, confused, like I'm standing at the edge of something I don't understand and can't control. Good, Killian said, and his smile was genuine. That means you're actually living instead of just existing. Living is overrated, I said, but I didn't mean it. Living is the only thing that matters, Killian corrected. Everything else is just administration. Day 6. He showed up at my apartment unannounced at 11 p.m. with takeout, and the explanation that he was in the neighborhood, which was an obvious lie, but I let him in anyway. We ate Thai food on my couch while watching a documentary about financial fraud, and Killian provided surprisingly detailed commentary about the techniques they'd used. You know a lot about money laundering, I observed. I know a lot about a lot of things, Killian replied. Occupational hazard of the consulting business, or you're secretly a criminal, I suggested. only half joking. Would it bother you if I was? He asked, and something in his tone made me look at him carefully. Are you? I pressed. Define criminal, Killian said, because the law is subjective depending on jurisdiction, and morality is even more flexible. That's not an answer, I said. No, it's not, he agreed, but it's the only one I can give you right now. Sloan, I promise I'm not doing anything that would endanger you, but my business requires discretion for a reason, and I need you to trust that I'll tell you more when I can. That's asking for a lot of trust, I observed. I know, Killian said, which is why I'm asking instead of demanding. You can walk away right now. End the week early. Decide this is too complicated. I won't fight you. I should have done exactly that. Should have ended this before it got more complicated. But looking at him on my couch, his tie loosened and his guard down, I found myself saying something different. One more day, I said. You have one more day to prove this is worth the risk. I'll take it, Killian replied, and kissed me. It wasn't our first kiss. He'd kissed me goodbye after dinner, quick and chaste. But this was different, deeper, more honest. His hand in my hair, mine fisted in his shirt. Both of us giving in to the tension that had been building all week. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, Killian rested his forehead against mine. I should go, he said, but made no move to leave. You should, I agreed, but my hand stayed on him. Tomorrow, he said, final day of the week. I want to show you something. What? I asked. Who I actually am, Killian replied. All of it. The parts I've been careful about. And then you can decide if you still want this. That sounds ominous, I observed. It's honest, he corrected, which is what you asked for. He left before I could ask more questions, and I sat on my couch with my lips still tingling, and the growing certainty that tomorrow was going to change everything. Day 7. The address he sent me was in the financial district, a building I recognized as headquarters for Gray Security Solutions, one of the most powerful private security firms in the country. I stood outside for 5 minutes debating whether to go in before finally texting him. Me. Why are we meeting here? Killian. Because I work here. Come up. Top floor. Security will be expecting you. I rode the elevator up with mounting dread, and when the doors opened directly into a penthouse office, I understood immediately. The space screamed power, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art that probably cost millions, and furniture that suggested someone who made decisions that affected entire industries. Killian stood at the windows in a suit that made all his other suits look casual, and when he turned to face me, I saw truth written in his expression. You're not a consultant? I said slowly. I am a consultant, Killian corrected. Just not the kind you were thinking. Sloan. Meet the real me. Killian Gray, CEO of Gray Security Solutions. We handle risk assessment and strategic protection for clients who require absolute discretion. Protection, I repeated. What kind of protection? The kind that sometimes requires operating in moral gray areas, Killian said carefully. The kind that means my clients trust me with things that could destroy them if they became public. The kind that means I've built an empire on secrets and discretion. I stared at him, pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. The Escort thing. That was you testing me. No, Killian said firmly. That was me doing a favor and meeting someone unexpected. Everything after that first night has been real. Sloan, including this, including showing you who I actually am. Why? I asked. Why risk showing me? I stopped, realizing I had no idea what I could actually do with this information. Because you were right, Killian said, moving closer. I'm not who I said I was, and I'm tired of performing. With you, I don't want to perform. I want to be honest. Even if that means you walk away. I should walk away, I said. This is insane. You're some kind of powerful CEO who does what, exactly? Protects criminals. I protect people who need protecting, Killian corrected. Some of them are criminals by legal definition. Some are just powerful people with powerful enemies. I don't judge. I just keep them safe. That's morally ambiguous at best, I said. Welcome to my world, Killian replied. It's not black and white. It's all gray, and I'm offering you the choice to be part of it or walk away. No judgment either way. I looked at him, at this man who'd somehow dismantled every defense I had in 1 week, and realized I was standing at exactly the kind of precipice I'd spent my entire life avoiding. This is the worst idea I've ever had, I said. Probably, Killian agreed. But you hired me because you wanted to feel something real, and this is as real as it gets. So what's it going to be, Sloan? Walk away safe, or stay and see what happens when you stop controlling everything? And standing there in his office overlooking the city, I made the most terrifying, exhilarating, completely irrational decision of my entire carefully controlled life. I'm staying, I said, for now. But Killian, if you lie to me again, we're done. Completely. No second chances. Deal, he said, and kissed me like I'd just given him something precious. And maybe I had. Maybe we both had. Chapter 6. The Gray Areas.
What are you going to do?
Staying comes with conditions, Killian said, pulling back from the kiss but keeping his hands on my waist. If you're going to be in my life, actually in it, you need to understand what that means. Which is? I asked, trying to ignore how good his hands felt, even through the fabric of my dress. It means there are things I can't tell you, Killian said. Client confidentiality isn't optional in my world. It's survival. So sometimes I'll disappear without explanation. Sometimes I'll take calls I can't let you hear. Sometimes I'll come home late, smelling like expensive whiskey and expensive problems. That sounds like a terrible relationship, I observed. It is, he agreed, but it's honest terrible instead of dishonest perfect. And I think you'd rather have truth with complications than pretty lies. He wasn't wrong, and I hated that he could read me so accurately. And what else? I asked. You'll meet people who terrify you, Killian continued, moving to his desk and pouring 2 glasses of something amber. Clients who've done things that would make you lose sleep. And you'll have to smile and be polite because that's what being with me requires. I'm very good at polite, I said, accepting the glass even though I rarely drank whiskey. You're good at performing polite, Killian corrected. There's a difference. This requires actual composure when someone casually mentions they've solved problems permanently. The euphemism wasn't lost on me, and I felt ice slide down my spine. Your clients kill people. Some of them have, Killian said carefully. Most just threaten very convincingly. My job is making sure the threats stay theoretical instead of practical. By doing what exactly? I pressed. By being better at strategy than they are at violence, he replied, sitting on the edge of his desk. By knowing things they don't know. By having connections they can't access. By being indispensable enough that hurting me would be catastrophically stupid. That sounds exhausting, I observed. It is, Killian agreed, which is why I don't do relationships. They're leverage, vulnerability, a weakness that smart enemies exploit. And yet, here you are, I said, telling me all of this instead of just walking away. Here I am, he confirmed, and something in his expression was almost vulnerable. Being spectacularly stupid, because you make me want things I've convinced myself I don't need. Like what? I asked, moving closer despite my better judgment. Like someone who actually knows me, Killian said quietly. Not the performance. Not the CEO who handles impossible situations. Just the person underneath who's tired of being alone in a room full of people. The honesty of it struck something deep, and I found myself standing between his legs, my hands settling on his shoulders. I know that feeling, I admitted. The alone in a room full of people thing. It's why I hired you in the first place. I know, Killian said, his hands sliding up my sides. I saw it the moment you opened that hotel door. This woman who had everything organized except the parts that actually mattered. Stop analyzing me, I said, but without heat. I can't, he replied. You're the most interesting problem I've encountered in years, and I'm very good at solving problems. I'm not a problem to solve, I protested. No, Killian agreed, pulling me closer. You're something much more complicated than that. He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I let myself fall into it because maintaining control felt impossible when his hands were in my hair and his mouth was making promises his words hadn't quite articulated yet. We broke apart when his phone rang, and I watched frustration flicker across his expression before he checked the screen. I need to take this, he said, already moving away. Client emergency, 5 minutes. Take your time, I replied, moving to the windows while he answered in a language I didn't recognize. The conversation lasted 7 minutes, his tone shifting from controlled to absolutely lethal before ending with what sounded like instructions delivered in ice. Problem? I asked when he hung up. Always problems, Killian said, but his expression had shifted into something colder. One of my clients just had his daughter threatened. I need to handle it before it escalates. Handle it how? I asked carefully. By making very clear what happens to people who threaten things that belong to my clients, Killian replied, and the casual menace in his voice was genuinely frightening. This is what I do, Sloan. I make problems disappear, sometimes permanently. You said you don't kill people, I challenged. I don't, Killian confirmed, but I know people who do. And sometimes making a threat disappear requires making the person issuing it understand that continuing would be a fatal mistake. That's still violence, I said. That's prevention, he corrected. Violence would be letting someone hurt a child because I was too moral to get my hands dirty. I prevent that violence by being willing to do what's necessary. The logic was sound, even if the ethics were questionable, and I found myself nodding slowly. How long will this take? I asked, handling it. Few hours probably, Killian said, already moving toward his desk to grab his jacket. I'll have someone drive you home, or you can wait here. There's a guest room, kitchen, whatever you need. I'll wait, I surprised myself by saying. I want to see what you're like when you come back, after handling things. Killian stopped, turning to study me. That's not a good idea. I'm not pleasant after this kind of work. I didn't ask if you'd be pleasant, I said. I asked to see the real version, the one who does impossible things and comes home tired. You're serious, he said, surprise evident in his tone. Completely, I confirmed. You said staying means understanding your world. This is part of that world, so I'll wait. Killian crossed back to me, cupped my face with both hands, and kissed me with bruising intensity before pulling back. Make yourself comfortable, he said. Don't answer the door. Don't leave without security. And Sloane? Yes, I asked. Thank you, he said quietly, for staying, for being willing to see this. Most people run when they realize what I actually do. I'm not most people, I replied. No, Killian agreed, something warm breaking through the cold. You're absolutely not. He left, and I was alone in his office overlooking the city, and I realized I'd just agreed to wait for a man who was potentially orchestrating violence on behalf of a client whose daughter had been threatened. This was insane. This was completely irrational. This was exactly the kind of loss of control I'd spent my entire life avoiding. But settling into his guest room with a book from his surprisingly extensive library, I found I didn't want to be anywhere else, which was either the most honest thing I'd ever acknowledged or the beginning of a catastrophic mistake, possibly both. He returned 4 hours later looking exhausted and dangerous, his jacket gone and his shirt sleeves rolled up and blood on his knuckles that made my stomach drop. Is that yours? I asked from where I'd been reading. No, Killian said shortly, moving to the bar to pour whiskey. And the person it belongs to won't be threatening anyone's daughter again. Did you kill them? I asked, needing to know. No, he said, downing the whiskey in one swallow. But they'll spend the next 6 months recovering, and the rest of their life remembering what happens when you make threats you can't back up. That's horrifying, I said. That's my world, Killian replied, pouring another glass. Still wanna stay? I should have said no, should have been horrified and left and never looked back. But looking at him standing there, exhausted and dangerous and completely honest about what he was, I found myself standing and crossing to him. Yes, I said, I still want to stay. You're insane, Killian said, but he pulled me close anyway. Probably, I agreed. But you make insane feel like the only rational option. He laughed, actually laughed, the sound rough but genuine, and kissed me like I'd just given him absolution. And standing there in his arms with blood on his knuckles and truth between us, I realized I'd completely lost control of my carefully organized life, and somehow I was fine with that.
He explained that his clients sometimes solve problems permanently, took a call and switched languages to give deadly instructions, stepped out to deal with a threat against a client's daughter, came back with blood on his knuckles, and she said, "I'm staying anyway." This woman looked at violence and moral ambiguity and went, "Yeah, that tracks," because apparently her control issues evaporated the second he kissed her, LOL.
Chapter 7. The Real Power.
I can't believe this happened!
I spent the night at Killian's penthouse, not in his bed, but in the guest room, because despite the blood on his knuckles and the violence he'd casually orchestrated, neither of us was quite ready to cross that particular line yet. But I woke up to the smell of coffee and found him in the kitchen making breakfast with the same efficient precision he applied to everything else, and something about the domesticity of it felt more intimate than sex would have. "You cook," I observed, accepting the espresso he handed me. "I survive," Killian corrected. "Cooking implies creativity. I follow recipes with military precision and hope for edible results." "That sounds familiar," I said, and he smiled. "We're more alike than you want to admit," he replied, plating eggs with geometric precision, both of us controlling our environments, because the alternative is chaos. "The difference is, my chaos doesn't involve blood," I pointed out. "Your chaos involves dying alone surrounded by perfectly organized spreadsheets," Killian countered. "I'm not sure that's better." "It's legal," I said. "Unlegal and empty are not mutually exclusive," he replied, and I didn't have a good argument for that. We ate in comfortable silence, and I was finishing my coffee when Killian's phone buzzed with what looked like a news alert. His expression shifted immediately, going carefully blank in a way that made my instincts flare. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said too quickly, setting down the phone. "Just work." "You're lying," I observed. "Deta, your jaw does this thing when you're calculating whether to tell the truth?" "Observant," Killian said and sighed. "There's a charity gala tonight. Major political donors, city elite, the kind of event where everyone who matters shows up to be seen. I'm expected to attend." "So attend," I said, confused why this required lying. "I'd like you to come with me," Killian said carefully. "But it means being seen publicly with me, being associated with what I do." Meeting the kind of people who will Google you immediately and draw conclusions about why you're with me. What kind of conclusions? I asked. That you're either very brave or very stupid, Killian replied bluntly, because people who know what I actually do don't date me casually. They understand that being with me means accepting certain realities about how power actually works. I thought you ran a security consulting firm, I said. I do, Killian confirmed. But Sloan, the clients I consult for aren't just wealthy, they're powerful, politically connected, the kind of people who shape policy and influence elections and make problems disappear with phone calls. And I'm the person who keeps their secrets safe. The implication settled over me slowly. You're talking about corruption. I'm talking about how the world actually functions, Killian corrected. Above a certain level of wealth and power, the rules are different. My job is making sure my clients can operate within those different rules without consequences. I stopped, trying to process. That's not security consulting. That's facilitating whatever they want to do. Yes, Killian said simply. And tonight, you'll meet some of them. Senators, CEOs, people whose names you recognize from news coverage, and they'll assess whether you're a liability or an asset to me, whether you can be trusted with what you'll inevitably learn just by being in the room. And if they decide I'm a liability, I asked, then I make it very clear you're not, Killian said, his voice dropping into something dangerous, which is why I'm asking instead of just bringing you, because once you walk into that room with me, you're committed. You can't unknow what you'll see, can't unhear what you'll overhear, can't pretend the world is simpler than it actually is. I should have said no, should have recognized this as the exit point, the moment where rational people chose safety over curiosity, but looking at him offering me truth wrapped in warning, I found myself nodding. I'll go, I said, but Killian, I need you to promise me something. What? He asked. No more surprises, I said. After tonight, if there's something else I should know about what you do or who you are, you tell me, immediately. I can handle truth. I can't handle discovering things that change everything. Deal, Killian agreed. But Sloan, after tonight, you might wish you'd walked away when you had the chance. The gala was at the Metropolitan Museum, black tie and exclusive enough that security checked invitations twice, and I wore a dress Killian had sent over that probably cost more than my car. You clean up well, I said when he collected me from my apartment. And that was an understatement. He wore a tuxedo with the kind of tailoring that whispered obscene amounts of money, and the way he looked at me suggested the dress was achieving its intended effect. You're stunning, he said, offering his arm, ready to meet the people who actually run things. Not even remotely, I admitted, but took his arm anyway. The museum was transformed into something glittering and excessive, and I watched Killian navigate through the crowd with the ease of someone who belonged there, pausing to exchange precise greetings with people I recognized from news coverage, a senator, a tech billionaire, the CEO of a pharmaceutical company currently under federal investigation, and they all greeted Killian with the kind of respect that suggested he held power over them, rather than the other way around. Killian Gray, a voice called, and I turned to see a man in his 60s approaching with predatory confidence. I didn't know you were bringing a guest. Robert, Killian replied smoothly. This is Sloan Hart. Sloan. Robert Chen. He runs the Chen Foundation. I recognized the name. The foundation donated millions to political campaigns and wielded enormous influence over city policy. Pleasure, Robert said, his eyes assessing me with uncomfortable intensity. How did you meet our Killian? Through work, I said, using the vague truth we'd agreed on. She's a consultant, Killian supplied. Very discreet, very competent. I trust her judgment. The emphasis on trust was clearly deliberate, and I watched Robert's expression shift to something more approving. Anyone Killian trusts is worth knowing, Robert said. You'll have to tell me more about your work sometime. We're always looking for talented people who understand the value of discretion. He left before I could respond, and I turned to Killian with questions already forming. Don't, he said quietly, guiding me toward the bar. Not here. Too many people listening. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in power dynamics I'd never fully understood before. I watched Killian move through the crowd, having conversations that looked casual, but were clearly weighted with importance. And slowly I started recognizing patterns. The way certain people deferred to him, the way others sought his approval, the way his presence at certain conversations seemed to signal legitimacy or endorsement. This wasn't just a security consultant attending a party. This was someone who held actual power over powerful people. You're not what you said you were, I murmured, when we finally had a moment alone on a balcony overlooking the sculpture garden. I told you exactly what I was, Killian corrected. You just didn't understand the scope of it. The scope being that you're, some kind of power broker? I challenged. These people don't just hire you for security. They need your approval, Your endorsement, your protection from consequences. Yes, Killian said simply. I know things they don't want known. I have access they can't get elsewhere. I provide services that keep them insulated from legal and political repercussions. That makes me valuable, indispensable, someone they can't afford to cross. That's not security, I said. That's control. That's survival, Killian replied, his eyes scanning the party with practiced vigilance. In this world, you're either controlling the game or being controlled by it. I chose the former. And me? I asked quietly. What am I in all this? Killian stopped, something vulnerable breaking through his controlled exterior. You're the first person in years who's seen me as something other than useful, who looks at me and sees an actual person instead of just leverage or threat or asset. And that's terrifying because it means I have something to lose. Before I could respond, a woman's voice interrupted. Killian, darling. There you are. I turned to find a stunning woman in her 40s approaching, her dress probably worth more than my apartment, and I watched Killian's expression shift to something more guarded. Victoria, he said neutrally. I didn't know you'd be here. I'm everywhere important, she replied, her eyes sliding to me with calculating interest. And who's this? Your latest project. Sloane Hart, Killian said, his hand settling possessively on my back. Sloane? Victoria Ashford. She runs the Ashford Group. I recognize the name. Real estate development with alleged ties to organized crime, though nothing had ever been proven. Charming, Victoria said, and the word felt like an insult. Killian, we need to discuss the situation with the waterfront development, privately. Later, Killian said firmly. I'm occupied. It's urgent, Victoria pressed, and I heard steel beneath the politeness. And it can wait, Killian replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Victoria studied us both for a long moment before smiling with practiced grace. Of course. Enjoy your evening. She left, and I felt tension I hadn't noticed drain from Killian's posture. Ex-girlfriend? I asked. Ex-client who wanted to be more, Killian corrected. I declined. She took it poorly, tried to leverage information she thought would hurt me, learned very quickly that threatening me was a catastrophic mistake. What did you do? I asked, not entirely sure I wanted to know. I made very clear what happens when people cross certain lines with me, Killian said, and the casual menace in his voice was genuinely frightening. She lost 3 major development deals, her primary investors, and her reputation in certain circles, all within a week. Because she tried to blackmail you, I said slowly. Because she forgot that I know everyone's secrets, Killian corrected, including hers. And I'm very good at making sure people remember why crossing me is inadvisable. I stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. Not the charming man who'd shown up at my hotel, not the thoughtful person who'd made me breakfast, but the dangerous power broker who could destroy someone's entire life with a series of phone calls. You're terrifying, I said. Yes, Killian agreed, but I'm honest about it, which is more than most people in this room can say. Is that supposed to be comforting? I asked. It's supposed to be truth, he replied, turning to face me fully. Sloane, I told you walking in here meant seeing the real version of my world. This is it. I'm not a good person. I'm not a hero. I'm someone who's very good at keeping powerful people's secrets and making their problems disappear. And if you stay with me, you're accepting that, all of it. And if I can't, I challenged, then you walk away now, Killian said quietly. Before this gets more complicated, before you're in too deep to leave without consequences. I should have walked away, should have seen this as the warning it clearly was. But looking at him standing there, dangerous and honest and completely himself, I found myself asking a different question. What if I don't want to walk away? I said. What if I want to stay exactly as complicated and deep as this gets? Killian stared at me like I'd just said something incomprehensible. You're serious. Completely, I confirmed. You said I hired you because I wanted to feel something real. Well, this is real. Terrifying and morally ambiguous and absolutely insane, but real. And I'm tired of pretending I want safe when what I actually want is this. You're going to regret this, Killian said, but he was already pulling me closer. Probably, I agreed. But I'd rather regret choosing something than regret never choosing at all. He kissed me there on the balcony with the city spread below us and powerful people inside who would definitely notice and draw conclusions, and I kissed him back thinking that I'd just committed to something that was either going to save me or destroy me, possibly both. Chapter 8. The Truth Beneath the Truth.
What are they talking about?
I stayed at Killian's penthouse that night after the gala and woke up at 3 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty and voices coming from his office. I should have stayed in bed, should have respected his privacy like a rational person who understood boundaries, but I'd never been particularly good at leaving mysteries unsolved, and the tone of the conversation filtering through the door made my instincts flare with warning. I moved closer, careful to stay out of sight, and caught fragments of conversation that made my blood run cold. The shipment arrives Tuesday. A man's voice I didn't recognize. Castellanos people are expecting their cut by Friday. or they'll consider it a breach. Castellano can wait until I'm satisfied the route is clean. Killian's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. Last time we moved too fast and lost 3 containers to federal attention. I'm not repeating that mistake. With respect, boss, we can't afford to keep Castellano waiting. He controls the port access we need for the next 6 months. Then remind Castellano that I control the information that keeps him out of prison, Killian replied with lethal calm. He'll wait, or he'll find out what happens when people pressure me on timeline. There was silence, then nervous laughter. Understood. I'll relay the message. Do that. And Marcus, make sure the East Side territory issue is handled before it becomes public. I don't care how you do it. Just make the problem disappear quietly. Already handled. The Volkov crew won't be making any more noise about expansion. Good. Anything else? The Chen Foundation wants confirmation you'll support their candidate for city council. They're offering standard terms plus 20% of the development contracts if he wins. Tell them I'll consider it after they handle the zoning issue we discussed, Killian said. I'm not backing politicians who can't deliver basic favors. Understood, boss. I'll set up the meeting for next week. I heard movement and barely made it back to the bedroom before the office door opened, sliding under the covers and forcing my breathing to stay even while my heart hammered. Killian appeared minutes later, sliding into bed beside me with the careful movements of someone trying not to wake a sleeping partner, and I lay there in the darkness trying to process what I'd just heard. Shipments, territory, making problems disappear, people calling him boss, with the kind of deference that suggested he commanded something much larger than a consulting firm. This wasn't just moral gray areas. This was organized crime, actual, structured, territory-controlling organized crime, and I was sleeping in the bed of the man who ran it. I waited until his breathing evened out before carefully extracting myself and moving back to the guest room, because lying next to him while my brain spiraled felt impossible. I spent the rest of the night alternating between panic and strange calm, and when dawn broke, I found Killian standing in the doorway watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "How much did you hear?" he asked quietly. "Enough," I said, sitting up. "Shipments, territory, Castellano, the part where someone called you boss, like you're running an actual organization." Killian was quiet for a long moment, then moved into the room and sat on the edge of the bed with careful distance between us. "I was going to tell you," he said finally. "Today, actually, before you overheard." "Tell me what exactly?" I challenged. "That Gray Security Solutions is fake, that you're actually some kind of crime boss." "Gray Security is real," Killian corrected carefully. "It's a legitimate business with legitimate clients. But yes, underneath that, I run something else. Something that's been in my family for 3 generations. A crime family," I said, needing him to actually say it. "A business organization that operates outside traditional legal structures," Killian replied, and I almost laughed at the euphemism. My grandfather built it. My father expanded it. I modernized it and made it sustainable. "That's called organized crime," I said flatly. "That's called being a mafia boss." "Killian, we don't use that word," he said. "It's antiquated and draws attention. But yes, essentially, that's what I am. I control territory, operations, revenue streams that exist in legal gray areas or outside the law entirely. And Gray Security provides legitimate cover while also generating real income." I stared at him, trying to reconcile this with the man who'd made me breakfast and kissed me on balconies and told me I was remarkable. "What kind of operations?" I asked, needing details. "Import-export with creative accounting," Killian said. "Strategic information brokering. Protection services for businesses that can't access traditional security. Conflict resolution between parties who can't involve law enforcement. Those are euphemisms," I said. "Tell me what you actually do." Killian met my eyes with uncomfortable honesty. "We move products that have high demand and complicated legality. We provide information to people who need leverage. We protect businesses from other criminal organizations that would otherwise extort them. We mediate disputes between parties involved in illegal activities." "Drugs?" I asked bluntly. "Are you moving drugs?" "Sometimes," Killian admitted, "though that's less profitable than it used to be with legalization changing markets. Mostly we focus on goods with complicated international regulations. Art, antiquities, technology with export restrictions, stolen art," I clarified. "Art with disputed provenance," he corrected. "The difference matters legally, not morally," I shot back. "No," Killian agreed. "Not morally, but Sloan, I told you what I was. I just didn't give you the complete organizational chart. You told me you consulted for criminals," I said. "Not that you were one. That's not a minor detail, Killian. That's everything." "Is it?" he challenged. "Because you stayed after I showed up with blood on my knuckles. You stayed after meeting the people I work with. You stayed after seeing what I'm capable of. What's different now except you have a label for it?" "The label is the difference," I said, standing because sitting felt too vulnerable. "Consulting for bad people is morally questionable. Being the actual crime boss is... I stopped, trying to find words. That's not something I can just accept. Then don't, Killian said, standing too. Walk away, right now. I'll have someone drive you home. We'll never contact each other again, and you can go back to your safe, controlled, desperately empty life. The words hit like a slap, and I felt anger flare. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Killian replied, his voice rough. Fair would be meeting you under normal circumstances. Fair would be falling for you without 3 generations of criminal legacy making it impossible. But this is what we have, Sloane. Me, completely honest about what I am, and you, deciding if you can live with it. You're asking me to date a crime boss, I said, to be the girlfriend of someone who runs illegal operations and controls territory and makes people disappear. I'm asking you to be with me, Killian corrected. The person who makes you laugh, who challenges you, who sees you without the armor and wants you anyway. The crime boss thing is just infrastructure. It's not just infrastructure, I protested. It's who you are, what you do, the danger you operate in constantly. Yes, Killian agreed. And if you stay, that becomes your danger too, your risk, your reality. I can protect you better than anyone else in this city, but I can't make you completely safe, because being with me means being a target for anyone who wants leverage over me. That's terrifying, I said. That's honest, he replied, which is what you asked for. Complete truth about who I am, and what being with me means. So here it is. I run a criminal organization that my family built. I control significant territory and operations in 6 cities. I have power that comes from being willing to do what others won't. And I want you anyway, despite knowing you deserve better. I stared at him, at this man who'd somehow become essential in 2 weeks, and felt my carefully constructed worldview crumbling entirely. I need time, I said finally, to think, to process, to figure out if I can actually live with this. How much time? Killian asked carefully. I don't know, I admitted. More than right now. Less than forever. Take what you need, he said, and I heard resignation beneath the words. But Sloane, understand something. If you walk away, it has to be permanent. I can't do this halfway. Can't have you in my life casually while wondering if you'll decide tomorrow that it's too much. I need certainty one way or the other. That's not fair, I said again. No, Killian agreed, but it's necessary, for both of us. He had someone drive me home, and I spent the rest of the weekend alone in my apartment, trying to make a rational decision about something that defied all rationality. Stay with a literal crime boss who'd been completely honest about the danger, or walk away from the first person in years who made me feel actually alive. By Sunday night, I still didn't have an answer, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending the choice was simple. Monday morning, I arrived at work to find Tessa waiting at my desk with coffee and concern written across her face. You look terrible, she observed. What happened with the mysterious boyfriend? He's not my boyfriend, I said automatically, and it's complicated. Complicated how? Tessa pressed, following me into my office. Did he turn out to be married? Secretly poor? Bad in bed. Secretly criminal, I said, before I could stop myself, then immediately regretted it. Tessa's eyes widened. Like tax fraud criminal or actual criminal. Like runs an entire criminal organization criminal, I said tiredly. Complete with territory and operations and people calling him boss. Oh my God, Tessa breathed. Sloane, you're dating a mobster. I'm not dating anyone, I corrected. I'm having an existential crisis about whether I want to date a mobster. That's not a decision you agonize over, Tessa said firmly. That's a decision you make immediately by running away very fast. Except he was honest, I said, about everything. The danger, the reality, the risk. He didn't hide what he was once I started asking questions, and he's giving me space to decide without pressure. That doesn't make him less of a crime boss, Tessa pointed out. No, I agreed, but it makes him different from every other man I've ever met who lied or hid things or pretended to be something they weren't. Sloane, Tessa said carefully, you're not seriously considering this. I don't know what I'm considering, I admitted. That's the problem. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. There's a car downstairs. Black SUV. Get in it. Now. Don't ask questions. Just move. Me. Who is this? Unknown. Someone trying to keep you alive. Killian has enemies. One of them just figured out who you are. Move. My blood ran cold, and I looked at Tessa, who'd gone pale, reading over my shoulder. Is this real? I asked. I don't know, she said. But Sloane, maybe don't find out the hard way. I grabbed my bag and ran.
Honestly, what do you think is better? Going to therapy or dealing with a handsome, dangerous mafia boss to learn how to let go of control? Well, she clearly chose the second.
Chapter 9. The Choice.
He can't leave.
The black SUV was exactly where the text said it would be, engine running, back door open, and I hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before a man in his 40s with military bearing gestured urgently from the driver's seat. Miss Hart, Please, we need to move now. I got in, and the car was moving before I'd even closed the door, weaving through downtown traffic with alarming speed. Who are you? I demanded, gripping the door handle. Where are we going? Marcus Reeves, head of security for Mr. Gray, the driver said, and we're going somewhere safe while the boss handles a situation. What situation? I asked, my heart hammering. The kind where someone decided threatening you was a good way to pressure him, Marcus replied grimly, which means they're either very stupid or very desperate. Either way, you're not safe until it's resolved. My phone rang, Killian's name flashing, and I answered with shaking hands. Are you in the car? His voice was absolutely controlled in a way that made my spine straighten. Yes, I said. Killian, what's happening? Someone made a mistake, he said flatly. They're about to learn what happens when people threaten things that belong to me. Marcus is taking you to the secure property. Stay there. Don't leave. Don't contact anyone. I'll come get you when this is handled. Things that belong to you? I repeated, catching on that phrasing. Poor word choice, Killian amended. People I care about. Better? Marginally, I said. Killian, who are these people? Competitors who forgot why crossing me is inadvisable, he replied, and I heard violence beneath the calm. They won't forget again. I promise you that. Don't kill anyone, I said, before I could stop myself. I'll try to restrain myself, Killian said, and I couldn't tell if he was joking. Sloan, I need you to trust Marcus. He'll keep you safe, and I will handle this. Understand? Yes, I managed. Good. I'll see you soon. He hung up, and I stared at my phone trying to process that I was currently fleeing from actual mob enemies because I'd made the catastrophic decision to get involved with a crime boss. For what it's worth, Marcus said, catching my eyes in the rearview mirror. The boss has never brought anyone to the secure property before. You're the first. Is that supposed to be comforting? I asked. It means you matter, Marcus replied. Enough that he's willing to show you places even most of his organization doesn't know about. That's significant. The secure property turned out to be a renovated warehouse in an industrial area I didn't recognize, and Marcus led me inside past security that would have intimidated a military installation. There's food, entertainment, whatever you need, Marcus said, gesturing to what was essentially a luxury apartment hidden inside reinforced concrete. But Miss Hart, you cannot leave until Mr. Gray gives clearance, for your safety and ours. I understand, I said, and I did. I was in witness protection, mob style. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I tried reading, watching television, pacing, anything to stop my brain from spiraling about what Killian was doing to handle the situation. When he finally arrived, he looked exhausted and dangerous, blood on his shirt cuff that made my stomach drop. Is that yours? I asked immediately. No, Killian said, shrugging out of his jacket, and the person it belonged to won't be making threats again, ever. Did you... I stopped, not sure I wanted to know. No, he said, understanding the unfinished question. But I made very clear what happens to people who try to use you as leverage. There are 3 people in the hospital right now who will spend the rest of their lives remembering that lesson. 3 people, I repeated slowly. 3 very stupid people who thought threatening you was an acceptable negotiation tactic, Killian corrected, moving to the bar to pour whiskey with hands that weren't quite steady. They were wrong. Definitively wrong. Killian, I said carefully, you can't hospitalize people every time someone looks at me wrong. I can when they explicitly threaten your safety to pressure me into territorial concessions, he replied, downing the whiskey. That's not business. That's personal, and I handle personal threats permanently. The certainty in his voice should have terrified me, and it did. But it also made something in my chest warm, with the realization that this dangerous man had just demolished 3 people for daring to use me as a weapon against him. This is my world, Killian said, turning to face me. This is what being with me actually means. People will see you as weakness, as leverage, as a way to hurt me, and I will destroy anyone who tries, every single time, without hesitation. I stopped, trying to find words. Possessive, violent, excessive, Killian supplied. Yes to all of those, but also honest. I told you what this would be. Today you got to see it. I stared at him, at this man covered in someone else's blood, who just hospitalized 3 people for threatening me, and made a decision that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I'd ever done. I'm staying, I said. Killian went very still. What? I'm staying, I repeated, moving closer. With you, despite the crime family and the danger and the fact that you just sent 3 people to the hospital. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Sloan, he said carefully. You don't have to decide right now. You're in shock. You should take more time. I don't need more time, I interrupted. I've spent my entire life being safe and controlled and desperately empty. And then you showed up and made me feel actually alive for the first time in years. So yes, you're a crime boss. Yes, this is dangerous. Yes, I'm probably making a catastrophic mistake, but I'd rather make mistakes with you than be safe and alone anymore. You're insane, Killian said, but he was pulling me close. Probably, I agreed, but you make insane feel like the only rational choice. He kissed me like I'd just given him absolution, and I kissed him back thinking that I'd completely lost control of my carefully organized life, and somehow that was exactly what I needed. There are rules, Killian said when we broke apart. If you're staying, things you need to understand. Tell me, I said. You learn things. You forget them immediately, he started. Or you meet people, you don't remember their names or what they do. You see things, you pretend you didn't. And most importantly, if I tell you to do something in a dangerous situation, you do it without question. Those aren't suggestions, they're survival. Understood, I said. And Sloane, he continued, his hands framing my face. This isn't reversible. Once you're in my world this deeply, walking away becomes complicated, dangerous even. Are you absolutely certain? I should have said no, should have recognized this as the final exit point. But looking at him, seeing vulnerability beneath the danger, I found myself nodding. I'm certain, I said, terrified, and probably making the worst decision of my life, but certain. Then we do this properly, Killian said. You meet my people, understand the structure, learn how to navigate this world safely, and we figure out how to make this work. People are going to think I'm insane, I observed. People already think you're insane, Killian replied. You hired an escort for a corporate event. That was your baseline for questionable decisions. Fair point, I conceded, though that escort turned out to be significantly more complicated than advertised. Truth in advertising was never my strong suit, Killian said, and I heard amusement beneath the exhaustion. We stayed at the secure property that night, and I woke up the next morning to find Killian watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Second thoughts, he asked quietly. Constant second thoughts, I admitted, but not about staying, about whether I'm equipped for this, whether I'll mess up and get someone hurt, whether I'm strong enough for your world. You're stronger than you think, Killian said, pulling me closer. You've spent years surviving in corporate environments that would destroy most people. This is just different parameters for the same skill set. Corporate environments don't usually involve hospitalizing people, I pointed out. You'd be surprised, Killian replied. The violence is just more metaphorical. Usually, over the next week, Killian kept his word. I met his key people. Marcus, he's who ran security. A woman named Sophia who handled financial operations. A terrifyingly competent man called Vincent, who managed conflict resolution. Each of them assessed me with careful eyes and apparently decided I was acceptable, or at least not an immediate liability. I learned the basic structure of his organization, the legitimate businesses that provided cover, the less legitimate operations that generated actual revenue, the network of alliances and territories that kept everything running smoothly and slowly. I started to understand how Killian had built something that operated in shadows while presenting a completely legal facade. You're good at this, he observed one evening, watching me navigate a dinner with several of his business associates without flinching when the conversation turned to topics that were clearly coded references to illegal activities. And I'm good at performing, I corrected. You taught me that, remember? This isn't performing, Killian said. This is you actually being comfortable in an uncomfortable situation. There's a difference. He was right, and that should have concerned me. The fact that I was adapting this quickly to life adjacent to organized crime suggested either remarkable resilience or catastrophic moral compromise, possibly both. Sloane, Killian said later that night, both of us on his couch overlooking the city. I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous, I observed. It's honest, he corrected. I'm in love with you. Have been since approximately day 3 of our week experiment when you called me out for knowing too much about money laundering. And I need you to know that before this gets more complicated. The confession landed like a bomb, and I turned to stare at him. You're in love with me, I repeated slowly. Catastrophically in love with you, Killian confirmed, which is extremely problematic and makes you a permanent vulnerability. But there it is. Truth. I stopped, trying to process. Killian, we've known each other for 3 weeks. I know, he said, which should make this less intense but somehow makes it more. You're the first person in years who's seen me completely and chosen to stay anyway. That matters more than timeline. I don't know if I love you, I admitted. I know I want you. I know you make me feel alive. I know choosing you felt right even when it was insane. But love, that's complicated. Take your time, Killian said. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm patient when it matters. But looking at him, at this dangerous man who'd been completely honest about his world and given me every opportunity to walk away, I realized the truth. Actually, I said slowly, I think maybe I do love you, which is either the most honest thing I've ever acknowledged or a complete psychological break. I'm not sure which. Let's go with honest, Killian suggested, pulling me into his lap. It's more flattering. You're a crime boss, I said against his mouth. I shouldn't love you. You're an uptight consultant with control issues, he replied, kissing me. I shouldn't love you either, but here we are. Here we are, I agreed, and gave up trying to make rational decisions about something that defied all rationality, because sometimes the best choices were the ones that looked catastrophic on paper, but felt exactly right in practice. And Killian Gray, crime boss, CEO, dangerous man with blood on his hands and vulnerability in his eyes, felt exactly right, even when it was absolutely, definitely insane. Epilogue, 8 months later.
I need to fix this.
I woke up to Killian already dressed in a suit, checking his phone with the focused intensity that meant someone had made a problem that required handling. How bad? I asked, sitting up. Manageable, he replied, leaning down to kiss me. Territory dispute should be resolved by dinner. Define resolved, I said, because I'd learned that euphemisms mattered in his world. Diplomatically resolved, Killian clarified, as no hospitalizations required. Probably. I love how probably is your version of reassuring, I observed. I love how you're not running away screaming, he countered, straightening his tie. Most people would have by now. Most people are boring, I replied, getting up and stealing his coffee. I'm spectacularly reckless. You're perfect, Killian corrected, pulling me close despite his schedule. Even when you reorganize my office supplies by color, your pens were chaos, I defended. Someone had to intervene. He kissed me properly then, the kind of kiss that made morning meetings feel irrelevant, and I was considering making him spectacularly late when his phone rang with the tone that meant business couldn't wait. Tonight, he promised, pulling away reluctantly. Dinner, no territory disputes, no emergencies, just us. I'll believe it when I see it, I said, but I was smiling. After he left, I got ready for my own day, still consulting at Sterling, still pretending my life was normal corporate existence instead of nights spent with a man whose organization operated in 6 cities and whose enemies occasionally required creative deterrence. Tessa met me at my office door with coffee and her usual concerned expression. You're still alive, she observed. That's good. Surprisingly resilient, I agreed, accepting the coffee. How is the terrifyingly attractive crime boss, she asked, handling a territory dispute, I replied. Diplomatically, he promises. That man's version of diplomatic probably involves broken bones, Tessa said. Probably, I agreed cheerfully. But he's honest about it. That's more than most men manage. Your standards have gotten so weird, Tessa observed. My standards have gotten honest, I corrected. I'd rather have dangerous truth than safe lies. That evening, Killian actually kept his promise. No emergencies, no territory disputes, just dinner at home with wine that probably cost more than my monthly salary and conversation that ranged from his legitimate business deals to my ridiculous corporate politics to whether we should get a dog. A dog requires commitment, I pointed out. I hospitalized 3 people for threatening you, Killian replied. I think I can handle commitment. Fair point, I conceded, and leaned across the table to kiss him. Later, wrapped around each other in bed with the city lights outside and his hand tracing patterns on my shoulder, Killian said quietly, no regrets. Constant regrets, I admitted, but not about this, about you, never about choosing you. Good, he said, pulling me closer, because you're stuck with me now. Crime boss, complications, occasional violence, and all. Wouldn't have it any other way, I replied, and meant it, because I'd spent years being safe and empty and desperately controlled, and Killian Gray, dangerous, honest, completely mine, had taught me that sometimes the best life was the one you built in the spaces between chaos and certainty, even when it looked absolutely insane from the outside, especially then.
Now let's get to the fun facts of this story. It's too good, you can't miss IT. Killian had never done escort work before. It was a one-time favor for a friend who owns elite companions. She needed someone last minute, and he fit the profile. His blazer cost $8,000. She noticed immediately that something was off. Escorts don't wear custom brioni. Killian arrived at exactly 7 p.m. Punctuality she appreciated, even while panicking. His first moment of vulnerability. You're not what I thought you'd be. Most clients are desperate or lonely. You're neither. Speedboat ride, he owns several boats, grew up on his grandfather's yacht, and admitted to having enough money not to think about it. He showed up at 11 p.m. with Thai takeout, lied saying he was in the neighborhood, obviously he wasn't. They watched a documentary about financial fraud. Gala at the Metropolitan Museum, she met Robert Chun Chan Foundation, senators, CEOs, tech billionaires. Everyone treated Killian with a level of respect that suggested power over them. She used the term, a crime family, a mafia. He didn't deny it. We don't use that word. It's antiquated. But yes, essentially. He controls territory in 6 cities, a 3-generation operation, modernized to look legitimate. Perfect ending. I'd spent years being safe and empty and desperately controlled. And Killian Gray taught me that sometimes the best life is the one you build in the spaces between chaos and certainty. Did you like the story, my dears? Don't forget to comment what you thought. It's very important to me. See you in the next one.